And you're live. So if you are joining us, we are now live on YouTube. And if you can't tell, I am super excited about pretty much every session at the GSL Festival, but particularly this one because it's an issue that I have felt passionate about ever since I got my first period. And it is something that women all around the world, and indeed not just women, people who have periods, because it's not just women who can have a period, people in transition and people who are non-binary and people who are transgender can also experience periods. And it is something that brings so much shame and embarrassment, and it can stop people from experiencing the joy and the fullness of life. So last year we welcomed Janvi Patel, who spoke about how when she was a lawyer, access to period products was an issue for her. And every time she needed to go use the period bin in the bathroom, she would miss important decisions in board meetings. So these are things, these small little things of discrimination that prevent us from accessing decision-making policies and being people in the room and having a voice. So right now there are 12 million refugee women who do not have access to sanitary products. And we heard from Professor Alexander Betts yesterday about refugees. And this is one way that you can support refugees is by access to sanitary products. In the UK, 48% of girls are embarrassed by their period. That's 48%. That's half of girls are embarrassed by it. 78% don't feel comfortable talking about it. But as you can tell, I'm not part of that 78%. And many girls around the world miss out on their education because they do not have access. So we call this period poverty. And I'm going to now invite 3 young women to the stage who are leading the change in this area in their local communities and globally to change the way that we view periods and to support people accessing them. So Ella Atiantika and Het, who is now going to have to correct me with how I say her name, could you please turn your videos on and join me on the main stage? Because it is a real privilege and honor to have you with us. And let me grab Ella. So this is an opportunity for you to all share your journey and your insights, and there'll be an opportunity for you guys to ask questions, but I'm just going to ask you all to take it in turns to start with, and just tell me your name, where you're dialing in from, and what your project's called, and a little bit about, I'm going to give you about 2 minutes each to talk about your project and the organizations you set up. So I'm going to start with, oh my God, you're going to have to say your name so we get this right live. Het? Is that better?
Yeah, totally cracked that. Perfect.
You. You were actually unintentionally our GSL Global Goals winner this year. So you were actually the winner of our competition. So it is a real privilege to have you with us. So could you please tell us where you're dialing in from and a bit about the work you're doing, your organization that you set up, your project?
Thank you for having me. I was really excited for this 4-panel discussion. So, hey everybody, I'm Het Joshi and I come from India. Hope everyone's keeping safe and in a great mood right now, because we'll be talking about something which not everybody faces and which it doesn't affect everyone. So before giving an introduction to my organization or what we do, I will try my best to connect you to this issue. So let's go we actually fight for normalizing a process which actually, because of which process you are actually here. So you give a deep thought about it, and we obviously have a further discussion on it. And if I give a normal introduction now, we as an Adira Foundation, we are a non-profitable organization who fight to end period poverty and taboo across globe through service and awareness. So yeah, I'm really excited to talk about this, and yeah.
And where are you calling in from? Just so we can know where you're at, because I don't think everyone caught that you're in. Whereabouts in India are you?
From India, I'm in Gujarat.
Wow, okay. So I'm now going to hand over to Ella, who Ella is not actually in her location. She's in a different location, but I'll let Ella tell you where she is and what she's about. So Ella.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for having me. I'm actually calling in from Greece. I moved here a couple of months ago because I work with refugee women, and so the Greek islands are the place to be. I'm actually in Samos at the moment, but normally I'm located in Lesbos, so I'm just a bit all over the place. But yeah, I'm 21, and back in August I set up my organisation called the Pachamama Project. And we basically are growing a network of volunteers all around the world. There's 1,000 of us now. And we make reusable sanitary pads, which we then distribute to refugees who are dealing with period poverty. So yeah, that's a little bit about the project.
Thank you. We will come back to you, Ella, to find out more. And Atyantika, could you please tell us where you're from, the name of your organization?
I'm sorry, my internet is really bad. Is my turn yet?
You are on, we can hear you, and don't worry, it's all about connection, not perfection. So just fire away.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Atyantika. Thank you for having me. I am really excited to be here. I'm calling in from Cochin, which is in Kerala, which is one of the southern states in India. I am the co-founder and director of the Red Lotus, which is an organization that focuses on sustainable menstruation and on the proper disposal of menstrual waste. The other co-founders are probably in the audience, so they'll probably pipe in as well. And yeah, I'm just really excited to be here. I can't wait to see where this discussion goes.
Brilliant. And do feel free, if you feel inspired by each other, to say, I'd like to ask each other questions. So the first question I'm going to put out there is, why do you feel so passionate about this issue? So mine is because my mother had a really bad experience and from a very young age introduced me to the idea that my period wasn't shameful, but that's my story. So who would like to first jump in and tell us why they're so passionate about periods and period poverty and changing that?
I can probably jump in. So I'll start with a bit of context on how we founded the Red Lotus and everything. So it was in the middle of the pandemic, and I had this an essay of sorts on waste hierarchy. So I thought it would be a good idea to pay a visit to my local waste segregation plant, see the process for myself, take a few pictures, make it more authentic. And the day was hot. Okay, anybody who's lived in Kerala knows how hot it gets here. So it was going to be a quick get in and get out, and I didn't really want to spend a lot of time there. But I walked in, and the first thing I saw were these sanitation workers sort of sifting through these mountains of waste with their bare hands, just trying to pick out the menstrual waste so that they could dispose it off separately. And that itself, I was sort of like, how have I not known about this problem? And quite literally, it's happening right outside my window. This is a plant not a kilometer away from where I live, right? So I came back home, spoke to a couple of my friends, and we all were like, okay, we probably need to do something about this. And as we slowly immersed ourselves in research, we realized that it is our responsibility, as menstruators. The concept itself is biological, there's nothing to be ashamed of, but we are still producing waste. The average menstruator goes through like 4 to 5 pads a day. And a lot of people use menstrual cups, but the vast majority use tampons and pads, right? That's a lot of plastic. That is 90% of pads and tampons, they're composed 90% of plastic. Right? And as a global citizen, as a menstruator, it is your duty to ensure that you are disposing it off in the most sustainable way possible. We're hearing a lot about sustainability. We're hearing a lot about a common future, right? And as a citizen, as a menstruator, what are you going to do about that? And what are you going to contribute to that common future, right? So this one visit to this purely chance visit to this waste segregation plant really made us realize our responsibility that we held to ensure that this situation doesn't exist, like to ensure that this situation does not persist is probably what I'm trying to say. And so I would say that's really where that our passion comes from, to try and make the world a sustainable and more a better place. And as a menstruator, this is what we can do.
I think that's what's so beautiful about all your projects is they all kind of touch on the interrelatedness of the period. So you've got, I know, HIT, the things you've been doing, it's about access, but then you've also got the other end of the spectrum where you're looking at how we deal with that waste. Do you want to share about the work you do with helping people access periods in India, period products in India, HIT?
Yeah, sure. So I'll firstly talk about how we ended up, creating our Dira Foundation. So we as like school kids, we attend a lot of conferences, and in that middle of the pandemic, we were going through a lot of research papers from WHO, and we found out that only 36% of women in 21st century, only 36% women actually have access to menstrual products. And thinking about the issue of health, equality, there's a lot of things which come up to your mind. Because as we all faced COVID, we stopped ourselves and we realized that health is wealth. So we decided to come up with this organization, and we basically try reaching out women from like very remote places. We have done projects in Kashmir and in villages where there is not even a medical store. As we interacted these women, they have never heard about pads, and if they have heard about pads, it's a way in which people have portrayed them as a dangerous thing which causes you cancer and which is harmful for your body. So that's when we actually experience a lot of stuff going on which were really not helpful to the women. And also as growing up, I've heard a lot about periods being shameful, periods are impure, but I want to question everybody that menstruation is a process by which you are born right now. So do you mean to say that your birth is shameful, or is it impure? Because that's exactly where we are putting this right now. And it is as important as educating women, it is as important to educate the men. And successfully going through the GSL process, we have successfully launched our very first project in Siliguri, which is in West Bengal, cotton pads and a menstrual cups camp, which was a really huge camp. And the women are finally taken further to the second step, and in which we had our guy friends interacting with them and teaching them how to use the menstrual cups and the cotton pads. So yeah, that's a little bit about our journey.
Thank you. I'm going to now go over to Ella. And Ella, you run the Pachamama Project, and right now you're out in supporting refugees. You want to talk to us about, why you feel so passionate about this issue and what action you're taking at the moment?
Yeah, for sure. Well, for me, like, I've always felt particularly like it hurts me when I see social injustice, like all my life. Like I feel like really like personally attacked when other people are experiencing injustice. But for me, like I've always experienced like really, really painful periods. Like at the worst of times, I would like take to my bed for like 2 to 3 days, or like be sick or pass out because of the pain. And so I've been really, really lucky, and I've always been able to afford products, but I know exactly what it's like to miss out on school because of having a period, or to miss days of university. And I understand how that contributes to the equality issue in like the world, because if you can't go into school, if you can't get your education, if you can't go into work, how are you expected to earn that same wage, etc. And I think I ended up focusing on refugees just because they are probably the most susceptible members of society globally to this issue, just because as people on the move, as people who, as asylum seekers, they cannot actually legally generate income or get work. And so it's almost a given that they would experience period poverty if they're not in a situation where NGOs are, all around them. And yeah, I just think that everyone deserves a right to have safe sanitary products. Like it's just very, very basic to me. And so I guess we're just bridging that gap that, governments and institutions and authorities are letting us down on.
Brilliant, thank you. So my next question is around, because you guys all make social action look so easy, by the way. So I'm actually going to go kind of jump around, and I'm going to start with Ella this time because we finished with you. So Ella, what obstacles have you faced? What have you had to overcome to get where you are? Because, I mean, you've grown this organization, you're obviously being very active, but what obstacles have you overcome and what challenges have you faced in your journey?
Yeah, I'd say one of the main challenges we faced is the shame and the stigma, which is what you guys were talking about already. For example, like when we distribute our pads, like quite often people don't have access to like dryers, for example, and so they're having to hang them up to dry, and so we often face a lot of like apprehension when they're going to receive the pads, at how they will wash them, how they will dry them. And so we just have to get around that by giving pamphlets out, by suggesting that they pin the pads in their underwear when they hang them up to dry, and doing like menstrual education along with it, so that you're not just handing someone a product and go, here you go, like, you know, it's more like a gift, and we show them how to use them sustainably. So that's one of the big challenges we've had. Another one is that obviously, as you'll know, like period poverty is so multifaceted. Like you can't just give everyone reusable pads. It's not going to work for everyone. People, for example, who are in refugee camps quite often don't have access to washing facilities full stop. And so reusable pads actually wouldn't work for them. And so we've had to like occasionally work with organisations to provide disposables as well, to provide more of a multifaceted solution-based situation. But yeah, so those are our main challenges, but they're all things that we've been able to get around as and when.
Cool, and I'm going to open up the same question to whoever wants to jump in. Head?
Yeah. So working through a lot of cases, I would say the main obstacle which we have faced is changing people's mindset. Because no matter how many pads we distribute, how many camps we do, if the mindset is not going to be changed, this problem is forever going to be there. So whenever we used to go to camps in the remote places, you would be shocked to know that we were believed to be kind of crazy from their end, because the women in villages still believe that, you know, pads and sanitary products are very harmful for our body. So whenever we try to interact with them, there were a lot of people who would laugh at us. But we obviously had to not mind that and actually explain them the whole process. So explaining them what menstruating is, why menstrual products are so important, and explaining them that what all disease can be caused if you don't, you know, follow this process properly was a big challenge for us. And the fact that what we observed was that whenever we went for a camp to a place, there were a group of men who would gather to watch that what we were doing. It was like we were in a totally weird situation, because at one point the women were very shy to actually even speak out in front of the men. And whenever we used to distribute the pads, what they used to do is they would get a polythene bag with themselves, a black polythene bag, and they would hide and run to their homes. So it might sound funny, or it might sound like, no, it's not actually real, but even in the 21st century we face this, and that we face this because of the mentality, because of the mindset. That's it. And we believe that we should start a process from the very basic. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to first introduce them with the normal sanitary pads. We used biodegradable sanitary pads, and with that we also provided them disposable disposable bags in which they can dispose the sanitary pads later. So yeah, that's the main obstacle we had faced.
And finally, but by no means least,
I think Ella and Heath summed it up really well, because when you're talking about something as controversial as menstruation, there are people who will sort of shy away from the topic and from these sort of social impact projects. And I think that's something we at the Red Lotus faced a lot as well initially when we were just getting started. So, a big part of our project is to ensure that the disposal process is easy for menstruators and for sanitation workers, right? So, what we decided to do was to distribute these envelopes made of recycled newspaper. And the whole concept behind this was that menstruators can use this to dispose of their pad, their tampons, whatever it is, and it'll be easier for the sanitation workers to discern that this is menstrual waste. Because I mentioned they were not able to tell that this is menstrual waste, and they were like digging through mountains of garbage, right? So we were going from, when we first came up with this concept, we wanted to try it out on some people.
I think we might have just lost your connection there. So do shout if you can hear me or use the chat. Please continue. Go on. We're still there. Go, go, go.
Where did you lose me? Oh God, this is going. Where did you guys lose me?
We were just talking. Sorry, we were just talking about the
envelope?
yeah.
So I have one right here. The concept
Yes.
behind this, I think I went through the entire concept, right? So we were going around my residential area, like, hey, take an envelope, use it, tell us if it works. Then we'll go back to the sanitation workers and see if it works for them. But we needed people other than just me and my mom, right? We needed an actual community to contribute to this. And I would just like to mention that I come from a very, I would say, not a privileged section of society, but one that is largely educated, and you would expect them to know that menstruation is not an icky subject. You can talk about it. So we're ringing on people's doorbells, and I'm explaining the project to them. My friend is beside me, and I can sort of feel the trepidation, the hesitation from their side, and they're like, "Oh, you really want us to take this, and you want us to use it, really?" And I was like, "Yes, I want you to use these, please." So I would say, the societal stigma, the fact that like Heth mentioned, people think you're sort of crazy for doing this. I think the sanitation workers at one point, they were like, you really want to do this with us? And they themselves are the community that is being mistreated in this, right? You would expect that they want people like us to go forward and try and help them, but they themselves are very hesitant to talk about menstruation. They would rather live with this huge problem that exposes them to all sorts of diseases and is just in general very inhumane than talk about it. And I think that speaks for itself, the sort of stigma that exists. And it's bad, but I would also like to mention that on the flip side, that there are people who really take initiative themselves after they hear you talk about this sort of thing. For every one person that was very, do I really want to take this? There were like 10 more who were very supportive of the entire initiative. And I think those are the people that in the end really matter and motivate these sort of social impact projects. And in the end, we ended up naming these packets Main, which means me in Hindi. So it's sort of like, you accept your individuality. You are proud of who you are. So I fully agree with the points that Ella and Heth have been put forward.
Thank you. So I actually found out about menstrual cups because I was growing up in quite a progressive city called Brighton in England. And it was on the back of a toilet door. There was a sticker, and this was like almost, God, this shows how old I am, about 15, 16 years ago. And at the time, everyone thought it was like the most disgusting thing in the world. And now every one of my friends uses one. But as one of you touched on, not everyone's comfortable with it, nor can they. I mean, I grew up in the kind of sticker generation where you used to have to write newsletters and used to read things in like paperback. You guys are in a digital media generation. So like, how do you like rally up support that you're doing? How do we break down these barriers to people accessing education about it? What are you doing? So Ella, do you want to talk about what you're doing with the Pachamama Project? What tools are you using to help educate and share what you're doing?
Yeah, when we first started, so it started with just 3 of us making the pads back in August, and I sort of figured that we could get loads of people doing this. I had actually never sewn before, so I was aware that if I could make them, that there would be, thousands of people out there that could do it. And so I actually did a very traditional route. I just used email and I contacted everyone I could think of. I contacted schools, societies, women's institutes, everything, and to see if we could get people going. But yeah, I have definitely been able to use social media as a really powerful tool. Like, we've reached so many people via that. I've reached all my partners that distribute our pads on the ground via Instagram and Twitter. So yeah, social media is definitely a great platform for that, a great platform for education as well. But I just find actually through word of mouth, like actually so many of our volunteers didn't even know about period poverty before I contacted them, before they heard about it via the media. And now, their daughters know about it. Their sons are helping cut the material. Their partners are helping them as well. And it's amazing to see. And I think so often we actually exclude men from the conversation, and it's so, so important that we include them. I think we need to be getting this in schools to educate people from a young age, and not having girls and boys separate for all the conversations, but actually having boys feel like they're part of the conversation as well. So I think that's definitely something we need to do. But yeah, I mean, I would just really strongly encourage everyone to talk to people about it. Don't feel the shame, don't feel the stigma, push past it. Because actually I found so often, more often than not, the boys that I've spoken to about it, the men that I've spoken to about it are so mature about it, and they just feel like happy to be part of the conversation, to be given the opportunity to have a voice about it. So yeah, that's what I would say about it.
You touched on two of the things there, because I was going to say we were always separated at school. So I was going to ask you guys, and you just touched on it, Ella. So maybe you'd like to share your views on this, that like, how do we get men involved in people who identify as a different gender? Like, how do we include them? Because period poverty is not a female issue. So, and I believe that was one of your lines I saw on your social media hit. So could you talk to us about how we have conversations with our fathers, our uncles, our brothers, our colleagues? You know, how do we bring men into this conversation?
Yeah, definitely. So when I would say that when we started with our organization, I would say that social media played a huge part in this. When we posted about the data, what period poverty is, like more than half of my school, my batchmates, my friends, family didn't know about this, because we come from a section of society where people don't have the stigma. But when as you said, that it is very important to include men, to educate them about menstruation, that how important part it plays in your life. So we started interacting with guys of our age. We used to talk about periods. We would tell that this is the process, this happens, and we would take them to the camps, and that is where the real movie starts. Because after like the camp is over and we go back, they are traumatized by seeing the scenario which is there in the place, that people still think that it is very shameful. It is a natural process, and the fact that periods are as painful as a heart attack, it is obviously not a luxury. Like we have we have takes on menstrual products, and people said that it is a luxury, but it is actually a necessity. So I think including men is very important, and by social media we can definitely connect with people, and we can talk about periods. We should include guys, when we are actually talking about health issues like menstruation and period cramps, and also educate boys. And yeah, and parents, even parents should have this conversation. Even if you don't have a girl child at your place, you should make sure that the guy at your place has the equal amount of education about menstruation as the girl has. So, because if we tell that, oh, okay, we don't have gender equality, there's no equality in the society, we don't get, we are not considered equal, but we need, at some point, we ourselves need to put in some effort to explain them and to make them understand that it is something which is very normal and we need to normalize it. So yeah, that's how we can connect.
I think you just touched on that as well. These aren't luxury products. So here in the UK, we've only just removed the VAT tax. So women, we have spent hundreds of thousands of pounds paying for a luxury product, and that has only just been eradicated in January 2021. So this is very much an important issue. Now, Athian Tika, you've got to correct me if I say your name wrong. I'm sorry. I am trying. Can you also share about what experiences you've had of involving more people in your community, either men, people who are older than us as well, because this is also a generational issue. So I have women in my life who are older than me who still call it a curse, and that trickles down in a family. Yeah, I know, Ella, I felt bad about it too when I heard it. I was like, we can't call it that anymore. But these are views that were challenging. So what kind of challenging views have you come across, and how have you overcome those and helped educate people about them?
First of all, you're pronouncing my name fantastic.
Okay.
Don't worry about it.
Thank you.
You were talking about this sort of divide that exists. I've experienced that myself. At my school, this is a very common occurrence at my school for some reason, that there will always be someone who tries to flush their pad down the toilet. And so what our teachers and the school prefectorial council, what they do is that they heard all the girls out for some reason, and then in very hush voices, don't tell the boys what's going on. Somebody's tried to flush their pad down the toilet. Don't tell anyone. I just want to know who's done it. And a lot of my friends were like, I'm pretty sure they know what menstruation is as well. You don't need to be so hush hush about it. And I go to a very good school, English medium. We talk about all sorts of things, but this is the one thing that our teachers refuse to discuss inside the class, right? So that itself is testimony to uh, these challenging views that we face. But I think, but on the flip side, again, when we were handing out, we were doing another drive of these packets, and I had a woman who ordered a few. So we went over to her house, and she said, my son, he's in the seventh grade, he's in the eighth grade, whatever. And I would like it if he could volunteer with you. He knows what menstruation is. He knows, the difficulties with menstruators face. He knows all about period poverty. And I was just so genuinely happy to hear about that, because I can't say before we started this project that I knew what period poverty was. I've honestly learned along the way. And the fact that this boy, 13 years old, and his mother had educated him properly on, this is what menstruators go through, this is what I'm going to go through, and this is, what your daughter, your sister goes through, and that's great. So so you can see change coming, sort of. But again, even Ella mentioned, you need to incorporate the section of society that doesn't go through this. Only then will you be able to normalize it. You can preach all you want about period poverty, about improper, there not being any access to period products, about improper disposal. But there's no point if your audience is not able to incorporate what you're saying. And men are a large part of this audience that you're talking about, not just women. And you mentioned right in the beginning that it is not only women that menstruate, right? If the concept of menstruation is foreign to this section of society, how can you ever expect them to empathize with what the problem is?
Yeah. It's funny because systemic change does happen slowly, but the fact that we're even in this Zoom room talking about periods for me is like, I'm a little bit older than you. So for me, this is a massive change. So the fact you're young women around the world who are collectively trying to take action to break down stigma and taboo, like this is huge. And I know often when we're trying to tackle discrimination and global issues, they feel like not much has happened. But the fact is now a menstrual hygiene day. Please correct me if I'm wrong with the date, but it's the 28th of May. Is that right? Is that the right date, Ella? You're looking at me, I might be wrong. Yes. Like the fact that you're on Instagram and there are people with it, there are t-shirts, people are now talking about the first menstrual period being the menarche, which is a different word from the one that we ever heard of when I was younger. And we are moving away, but I know it must feel, it does feel challenging because it does feel like there isn't big change. But the fact you're all sitting here talking to me about it is a massive change. So I'm now going to throw out the question. I'm going to start with Atlantika because I feel like sometimes we're ending with you, but how do you stay motivated? I mean, it's not easy when you're faced with all of this stigma and what feels like a lot of blocks in your life. How do you stay motivated? What gets you out of bed and what keeps you going? I
would say perseverance. You mentioned that systemic change is really hard to come about. And, I'm from India. It's a society that's steeped in culture and tradition, and is to a certain extent very conservative, right? So there are days when nobody really wants to take a packet, or I can still see that no change is being come about in the way the disposal process at the sanitation plant is being come about. So what's the point of this organization if we're not directly able to make the impact that we want to? But then you have cases like this boy I mentioned and his mother who has told him what period poverty is, right? You have those sort of cases. We've had the great privilege of working with an NGO, with a local NGO, with an organization in Canada that focuses on period poverty. And when you directly impact people through these collaborations, the vast majority of people, they get it. And they're able to sort of then take that initiative to take example themselves and run with it. And those are the cases that really motivate us. And beyond that also, I have a dog, and whenever I walk my dog, on several occasions he's gone sniffing, and he'll find like a crumpled pad thrown on the street, right? I go back to the sanitation plant and I once again, that entire view of seeing them sift through a mountain of garbage. I really can't describe that entire experience. You know, do you want do you want your future citizens, the youth, to go through that in the future? You don't want that, right? You don't want them to build their lives on what is essentially a mountain of plastic, because that's what these pads and these tampons are. That is what is going to happen if you cannot practice sustainable menstruation. Or we're talking about period poverty. Do you want the vast majority of menstruators to use rags or sand or that sort of thing in substitute of a proper hygienic period product? Nobody wants that. So it's that thought that keeps, I would say, that keeps the Red Lotus going. We don't want that. We want a good future.
Thank you. Ella, do you want to share what keeps you motivated? Because I mean, these are not easy tasks you've all taken on for yourself. So Ella, what keeps you motivated?
For me, like, I think mainly it's the feedback and the personal accounts of the people that actually receive the pads. Like, I've had people tell me that they used to use leaves, for example, because they didn't have anything else, or socks or random bits of material and get infections, and they tell me about the sheer relief that they feel when they get this pack of pads that they know is going to last like 3 to 5 years. And by that time they'll probably have sorted their situation out. They will have more certainty. As people on the move, it's likely that they would have got their papers by that point and be able to generate an income. And so it feels like we're taking people out of period poverty, for good, taking people out of that situation. And I don't think there's anything really more rewarding than that. Also, like, the sheer amount of people that are getting behind the project is absolutely incredible. Like, we are getting nearly 2,000 pads coming through the door of my house every single week. They're filling up the house. We've got 1,000 volunteers now. We have 20,000 pads that have been made collectively overall. And so you can't not be motivated when you've got that many people getting involved and cheering on the project and just wanting to help people. It's just lots of people making a few here and there as and when they can, fitting it in their schedule. And yet we've helped 3,000 people now, and I know that we will just keep going and going and help more and more people. And so yeah, that is how I keep motivated.
Brilliant. I'm going to ask that question to you as well, Ahead. How are you staying motivated? And also, I'm going to throw out a little bit of twist as well, is how do you look after yourself? Because one of the other things that crops up is when you're giving so much, there's this risk of kind of burnout. So I'm going to change it ever so slightly for you and also ask you how you're looking after yourself in this process, as well as what keeps you motivated.
So I will totally be honest, there is nothing, like, whenever we do camps, we are exhausted, we are tired, we don't feel good sometimes when we are not welcomed. But the only thing which motivates our entire team is the smiles we see. Like, whenever we go to the villages, whenever we interact with those women, and when they tell us that we don't even have a medical store at our place, we use rags. As Ella mentioned, that they use leaves, and because of that, by the age of 40 or 50, they actually have to get their uterus removed because the infection has increased at another level. So the only thing which keeps us motivating is the happiness we see. Like, we did a project in one village, and after a few months of research, we found out that there were a few neighboring villages which had the same issue. Then we went for our camp there. So there's basically a village head in every village. So that lady had been waiting there, and she was so excited to see us. She was like, you have to come at my place, you have to have tea with us, you have to come. And we're like, no, we'll just do the camp and we'll leave. She forced us to be at her place and have tea, because it is, we might see this as a very normal thing, but for those women who are actually facing this issue, is a huge part of their life. And when they get access to menstrual products, they are actually able to work, because most of these women work in the farms, and in farms they face a lot of issues when they are on their periods. They are not able to work, and there's also a lot of smell problems which they face. And the biggest thing they were very happy about was that their daughters had the access to the sanitary products, and they were finally gonna go to school, because every month around 5 to 6 days they take off from the school, and eventually they have no motivation of going back to school and covering everything which is left. So yeah, that's the only thing which keeps us going. And because of the yesterday's news, like as we won the GSL, we got an amazing response. And from our neighboring cities, one of the guy wants to contribute 5 lakh rupees in the project. He said, I want to reach out 1 lakh menstruators, and I just want to help you out. So it might seem, yeah, it's definitely, as a student, we definitely feel like it's a winning part of thing. But also with that, the response, the help which we have reached is amazing. So yeah, and I would also, also with our team, a huge part of our project is Amy, Alice, and Jacob. If they are here, I'm very thankful to them.
Bless you. Thank you very much. Small teams make big impacts, and GSL is definitely an example of that. So I'm going to ask you each to give one example of how people can support this issue, and I mean support in sort of all levels. So obviously here you've just mentioned about people being able to give financially. So let's start with Ella. How can we support what you're doing with refugees here now? Because not everyone can go to Greece. So what can we do to support the work you're doing with refugees around period poverty?
Yeah, so if you are in the UK, in Italy, in Germany, France, or the US, you can actually join our volunteer network, and you can make the pads yourself, which we then distribute around the world. So that's how you can get involved with our project. Equally, if you're from somewhere else and you want to become like an ambassador for your country, we can definitely launch the project elsewhere. We want it all over the world. But yeah, I think even like on like a more basic level, if you see a homeless person in the street and you're giving them a bottle of water and a sandwich, also buy them a pack of pads. Like, it's so basic. We don't talk about period poverty. Like, I don't think I even knew what it was really until I sort of actually came up with the idea for the project. It all sort of came about at the same time, and it should be a household name. So what you can do is just talk to people about it, educate people, educate your family members, your friends, your colleagues, just chat about it, normalize the issue, because I always think that there's such a shock factor when I talk about period poverty, and there shouldn't be, because it's something that, like, you know, so many millions of women experience around the world, and people who menstruate. And so, yeah, talk about it around the dinner table. That's what I do. I, you know, force it down my family's throats. They're sick of me talking about periods.
Yeah, I can't say my brother's going to be best pleased when he sees me talking live on YouTube about periods. But I'm going to go at Janika. So obviously you were talking about waste and sustainable products, but that's not an issue that's just an issue in India. So what can we do in our home country, and how can we take action to support being sustainable menstruators if there's something that's available to us?
I think the most primary and the most fundamental thing that you can do is probably initially just educate yourself on the subject. You know, what is sustainable? The concept of period poverty and access to menstrual products is a whole lot more talked about than sustainable menstruation, right? But there's that you have to cater to that section of society that has access to menstrual products. But what happens after you throw it in the trash can, right? Do your research on where is your pad or where is your tampon going? Is it being incinerated? Is it going to a landfill? How is it being disposed of? Pay a visit to your local waste segregation plant, and chances are that you will find that things are not ideal. So I think you need to start by educating yourself, like Ella mentioned, talking about it, starting a conversation about it, because then you learn more, and then you realize how prevalent of an issue it actually is. We've all heard of the Sustainable Development Goals. One of them is sustainability, and SDG number 6 is actually clean water and sanitation. Yeah. And if you notice, the rights of sanitation workers is actually included within that goal, right? And you'll actually see how it all ties in together, how improper disposal of sanitary waste affects the environment, thereby hindering sustainability. And it also affects the rights of sanitation workers. It has professional implications for them as well. And the moment you educate yourself, you realize how big of a problem this is. And I think then it's intrinsic, the need to do something really comes about. I force it down the throats of my family members as well. My grandmother, she probably doesn't even menstruate, but I'm like, we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about this now, and you're going to actually realize how prevalent it is. And then it's going to come naturally that, hey, I should probably make the switch to more sustainable period products. And even if you can't, that's all right. Ensure at least that your waste is being disposed of properly. That's the basic thing that we can do. So I would really start with, educate yourself, start a conversation, and don't shy away from it. Really, just don't treat menstruation as if it is some sort of weird creature that you can only poke with a stick, right? It is natural, it is biological. Educate yourself. It's just really that simple.
This is why I wanted to call it the period power panel, guys. That's where that came from. And it is interesting. The first time I became aware of tampons being a waste problem was when I blocked someone's septic tank when I was staying in their house. And before then, because I have a different sewage system in my house, it had never crossed my mind. So until it became a very embarrassing problem and I watched someone fish it out of a septic tank, it hadn't crossed my mind. And as you're talking about it, I would definitely look into the life cycle of where these things are going. So Het, I'm going to pose the same question to you. For anybody in the audience, please do ask your questions. We've got some 5 more minutes with everybody. So Het, what can people do to support what you're doing? Because you're going out to rural communities, which is quite specific to your local context. So what else can we do in our local context to support this issue, or support what you're doing in your local context?
So I guess Ella and Atyanika has almost summed up everything. But one thing I would like to say is that if you cannot contribute, I'm not going to put you on work anywhere, or I'm not going to ask you to do anything. But if somebody is doing something, just don't stop them. Don't be a hindrance to something, a process which is going on. Because we are a generation where we don't face that amount of stigma which people of before generation used to face. So I would say that if you cannot contribute, we are not asking you to do anything, but if you would even just share one Instagram story on your profile, or if you have 100 or 200 followers, those 200 followers will be educated about an issue which is never talked about. Like, everybody's aware about global warming, and everybody's okay, we're gonna plant trees, otherwise you're gonna die, because it's affecting them. But we need to understand that menstruation is also affecting everybody. It's not just the women, and it's just not our issue, but it's everybody's issue. So I think we should take the advantage of social media and spread this word out, and let the Gen Z do the rest of the work.
I hope you're all going to now put your social media handles in the chat so everyone can follow you on the various platforms. So please do make sure that you're plugging your organizations, your foundations, your projects. And do you have any questions for each other? Because I have totally dominated. And if you've got in the crowd and you want to ask questions, please fire away now, whilst we have these incredibly young women with us. So we've got a question here. My question is that, have any of the panelists experienced any local community leader or political leader or administration staff who have taken interest? So have you ever, one of you mentioned the NGOs getting involved, like who have you kind of motivated to get involved with you? And they're also asking, why don't we discuss this as much as the issue, I guess, like you just said, Het, with climate change? So have any of you've both mentioned 2 instances where organizations have got involved, but I mean, it sounds like you're all getting noticed. So could you share your experiences of, I guess, how you've got noticed? Is it through social media? Is that the biggest way in which people are finding out about you? Just jump in.
Yeah, I'd say like the national media has had a huge part to play in it. Like, we've now been like recognised by like local councillors, the UN, UK government just gave the organisation an award for the work we're doing. So like we're getting out there, getting people like understanding what period poverty is and everything like that. I think the key issue is that it's very easy for people to go, oh, here's an award for the good work you're doing, but actually, like, we still don't have free products in public bathrooms, and I heard someone say that if men have periods, products would be free, and I'm inclined to agree, because toilet roll in public bathrooms is free. Like, why are period products not? And so I think there's still so much work to be done. We need to be like lobbying and talking to our local leaders and just getting it out there on social media, getting the public talking about it, because we still have so much work to do. And like I've always been like a strong advocate of like women's issues and just injustices in general, and yet I didn't actually know what period poverty was until last year. And yet I've always been a loudmouth about periods, like even when I was younger, because I experienced so much pain, like everybody in the room knew about it if I was having my period, like because I'd be crying. And so I think that I played quite a big role in like getting people at my school feeling more comfortable about it, because they had to look after me. But yeah, that's what I'd say. Like I think there are lots of organisations that are interested, but it's just whether they will take the next step and actually make fundamental change.
Okay. I'm now going to ask you a question from the crowd, actually. So we've just had a question saying, there seems that there's a geographical and cultural divide, so developed versus, I guess, what sometimes are called developing countries. Do you guys feel that this is accurate? Jump in, we call it popcorn, so just take your mute off and fire away.
Yeah, I would definitely. It is very obvious, I would say, but I think there are a lot of other factors that tie in as well, just beyond stigma and reluctance of people to talk about it. In countries like India, we have a massive population, right? We have issues like unemployment, we have issues like poverty, we have issues like nationwide hunger, that sort of thing, and the resources the government can sort of allocate towards problems like menstrual stigma or period poverty, those really take the they really take the backbench in these sort of things. And this is contributed to the fact that society as a whole doesn't really talk about this that often, so the government probably feels obliged to, okay, we don't really need to do anything about this, they're not going to talk about it anyway. So, but I think the situation in the West, where things are more developed, because a lot more resources have beforehand been allocated towards things like education, towards things like housing, that sort of thing. So now there is a lot more money and a lot more resources that you can pour into things like period poverty. So I think there is that certain reluctance as well, but you also have to take into account other factors, like I just mentioned. But I definitely agree that there is a very obvious divide, geographically and culturally.
And I guess the work you're doing where you are, and also I guess with Ella, that there's a big class divide or access in those issues. But is that fair as well, based on your experiences? So there's rural versus urbanized experience as well. I think it's remarkable that all of your projects are so interlinked. You've all kind of started your journey separate, and now you're all able to come together. So as we're about to wrap up, which I'm really sorry to say we have to because our next speaker's into the room, but what is the last thing you want to say to this global community out there? Like, what's your message that you'd like to leave other than power to the periods? I mean, what is it that you'd like to leave today saying? So I'm going to start with Het this time. So what's the message you'd like to leave us all with today?
All I would say is that it's high time we normalize everything now, because COVID has like taught us that life is short. You never know when you leave. So let's just normalize everything and live and let live.
Thank you so much. And Atiantika or Ella, who wants to go next? Yeah, Ella, what's the message you'd like to leave us with after this?
I think my key message is just that we need to include everyone in the conversation. Like, it's something I feel so passionately about. Like, single fathers, for example, should feel comfortable educating their daughters about their periods. There shouldn't be girls out there who don't even know what a period is when they start it and be terrified for their life. It's a global issue. It exists everywhere in every single country. That 1 in 7 girls in the UK are experiencing period poverty. And so there is no one that's watching, no one in the world that should be talking about this. Like, we should all be educating ourselves, educating each other. And getting the word out there.
Thank you. And Atiantika?
Be a more responsible menstruator. If you don't menstruate, be a more responsible person. Try to be as sustainable as possible, so that we can sort of alleviate the damage that we've already done. Be more empathetic. Go out and actually try and see if you can find the effects of these problems of period poverty, of improper disposal, of sustainable menstruation. Try and go look for them and you will find them. They're everywhere. And then you will realize that what you need to do, it's literally right in front of you. So I would say that.
Well, thank you so much for coming on today and speaking to us about such an important issue, and being possibly one of the personal highlights of my life, being able to talk about this. So, as I mentioned, I was a little bit older than you, and the fact that you were all shouting about this at the top of your voices and making change in it, I just want to get involved and continue to support you. So please do put in the chat your links so people can follow you. We'll also make sure this is now available on YouTube. So follow Ella, follow Het, follow Atvintika, find out about them, educate yourself about menstruation, learn about the period, embrace it, and enjoy having conversations about it. And thank you so much for your time. It's